when we stand up on the stage, the first thing that we need to do is stand and wait a beat. Good morning. When people leave their chair and they stand up onto that stage, their personality doesn't go with them.
What do you mean by storytelling, and how do people really think about what it is they're doing and take that concept and really apply it?
If you can't say something, change the word.
What makes a speech or a presentation memorable?
Definitely passion. The presentation isn't just standing up, it's honing that message.
If there's one final message that you sent our listeners away with that would help them to really think about where they are on their journey of mastering this skill, what would it be? Welcome to episode 12 of The Life of a Business Leader. Today we are talking about speak up, stand out, mastering the art of public speaking. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Hannah Shellswell. Hannah, thank you so much for coming on and being our guest today.
Thanks, Royston. It's brilliant to be with you.
So you've got a background in television, news, as a journalist and as a broadcaster, so there's probably no one better to talk about this subject than you. Let's hit the ground running and add some value for our listeners straight away. Public speaking is feared more than death itself. Is that a fact or fiction?
Fact. It's mad, isn't it? Think that, but it's true. That's what the surveys and the studies say. It's what Seinfeld says in his very famous little sketch that he does about it, that you'd rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy. So that's the reality for so many people. And it's a real shame, isn't it? Because it can really hold us back. It can hold us back as business leaders, but it can also really hold us back in life as well.
No, I've heard that stat so many times, and it is that, is it real? Is it fact? Or is it fiction? Why do you think public speaking has got such anxiety and a fear for so many people?
I think it's the spotlight, isn't it, that's being shone on us and everyone looking at us. And for so many people, we don't want to feel judged. We don't like that. And it's all of that anxiety comes, or all of those thoughts. Am I going to get it wrong? Am I going to make a fool out of myself? What if I don't get it right? And rather than filling our minds with positivity and trying to reframe that and thinking, hang on, this is a great opportunity and I'm an expert and I'm going to do really well at this, we seem to go to that negative, it seems, and then stepping out. It's a big deal, isn't it? For anyone. I mean, yes, it's about 75% of people experience that anxiety, but I think for most people, you will experience that if you're walking onto a stage. I still do. The heart can go that bit faster and the adrenaline's there, but it's how we really channel those nerves. I was actually doing a bit of research the other day about Gen Z, because I was thinking, well, with the new generation coming through, of course, they're on cameras, aren't they, all the time, and communicating in a very different way to how we were when we were growing up. So are they more comfortable? And it turns out that about 43% of those would rather jump out of an aeroplane than stand up in front of people. So they're braver than me when it comes to that. Those days are long gone. The Bridget Jones that I was in the newsroom, that is no more, I can tell you.
And you hit on a really interesting thing there, though, because when I think about when I was a child, of course, we never had phones until we were, almost young adults.
Yeah.
You mentioned a point there about the younger generations are brought up on gadgets. They are used to being on filming themselves for TikTok. They are used to doing films all the time. Do you think it's a generational challenge, this fear of speaking? And do you think actually the younger generations will embrace it and be so much better because of technology?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think there's loads of opportunities with technology. And I think young people, interestingly, are more confident speaking on camera. I'm running a content creation course at the moment. And what I'm noticing is that the younger people are way more comfortable with that, talking to the camera and making that work. But they prefer that and online interactions than they do in those face-to-face meetings. And what a lot of businesses are saying to me is that the younger people that are coming through find it difficult to maybe pick up the phone and have a conversation, walk into that networking situation, or speak up in the meeting. So those skills are key. And I believe that there always will be, because there's nothing like, here's there, Royston, and you've spoken at many events yourself, but eye-to-eye contact, that body language, that handshake, that's where that trust is built and that connection is built. So where we have all of this amazing technology now, and I think that brings opportunity, it does as well bring its challenges. So I very much hope that, well, at least for the next 100 years, until we all have AI avatars and all the rest of it that's coming, we will still have that face-to-face communication.
But it does beg a really keen point, particularly on what we're talking about today in terms of the skills to be better on stage, in meetings, one-to-one, one-to-many. But
Hmm.
when you think about technology, and I just want to dispel a myth that's really important, I think, in order for our listeners to get maximum value from our session today, that technology does not replace the need to really hone, polish, refine your presentation skills, does it?
Absolutely right. And there's so many things in that as well. So a presentation isn't just standing up, is it? It's about what you've just said. It's honing that message. And so often we go to presentations that are so dull and can be incredibly boring, or have gone off on a tangent. We think, what was that even about? So it's not just in the delivery, but it's what are we actually saying? And less is often more.
Yeah, yeah. And how did you get into your career? Just be good in terms of your backstory before we get into, because I've got a whole series of questions. I really want to plug your mind because I know you've got so many practical skills that you can share. So I really want to break it down and talk about overcoming fear, presentation techniques and preparation
Definitely.
techniques, engagement strategies, all those things. But just give us a frame. How did you get to the stage where you actually absolutely love standing up, speaking to groups and audiences, and how did you get involved in your career in journalism and broadcasting?
Okay, I'll give you a very quick summary, but to be honest with you, I was just really, really lucky because at 18, I was handed a microphone and I was told, oh, will you just go and interview these people? And we were live, doing a live broadcast for ITV at the time, the local news. And I didn't really think much of it. And I think the age thing helped. I think as we get older, interestingly, we can overthink things more potentially.
Yeah, yeah,
So I did a number of things. I started working on a channel at ITV, and I read the birthday cards with Oscar Puffin first of all, and
yeah.
then I went on to read the news, and then my career took me to the UK, where I worked for Central News and became the anchor there for Central News South, and I just loved it. I loved being out live reporting. And I think, when you get that grounding, and that's the thing, ultimately, going back to what you were asking earlier, is there seems to be this assumption that everyone can just get up and deliver. So, oh, you've now reached the position of CEO, so you should be able to stand on that stage. But the reality is, if you haven't done it again and again and again, and had
Yeah.
that experience and really learned those skills, then it's not necessarily something that is going to come naturally. So for me, I think I was fortunate because I started very young. And believe you me, I made plenty of mistakes live on air in front of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And but you learn through that. You just have to watch it, learn from it, pick yourself up, and move on. And many times, I think people stand up on that stage, be that as a child or as a young adult, or even as an adult of our age, and can have a traumatic experience, and then they can go, "That's it, I can't do it anymore." And actually, it's just pushing through and realizing we're all human and we're not going to get it right all the time. But yeah, I worked in national news as well. So reported on some of the big stories, reporting breaking news nationally and internationally. Reading the sport, I can tell you, was not a highlight for me, trying to read all the complicated names, having not seen the scripts beforehand, and presented other programs as well. But it's when I came back to Jersey after doing all of that, I got a job up at Highlands College teaching that, and loved it, and just saw those young people grow in confidence and realize, oh, I can stand up in front of people. I've got a voice. I've got something that I want to say. And I worked there for 3 years, got a teacher training qualification, and then realized I would love to help everyone really to be able to do this. And it's about building confidence and skill, but by building the skill, it builds confidence. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. I host events as well, and then really my main passion is really helping people to present well, whether that's on the stage, in a meeting, like you say, or on camera for a media interview.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, that context, that most people, whilst the title for today is Speak Up, Stand Out, Mastering the Art of Public Speaking, that public speaking could be, yes, you are speaking on a stage to an audience of 100 people. It could be you're doing a monthly all hands session and you just want to deliver your message with impact. It could be that you are presenting a proposal and trying to win a new piece of business. You're in a board meeting with a team. So one to many or one to few, the same skills will apply, won't they, Hannah? That's the important message to get across in order for people to really get value from today's session.
Absolutely right. And it may be that you're starting out on your journey and you are more junior in the office and you're being asked to speak out in a meeting for the first time. And that can be incredibly nerve-wracking, and you want to get it right and you want to be able to prove yourself. And then you might be having to walk onto a stage with an audience of 1,000, whatever it may be. It's a big deal and it's important to get it right. And the
Yeah.
same skills apply, the same communication skills apply across the board. Really, it's about storytelling, is what we say. It's like you just need to be able to tell stories and also be your authentic self. Because I think what I see a lot of is when people leave their chair and they stand up onto that stage, their personality doesn't go with them. And they go into this kind of presentation mode or this overly formal version of themselves. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's appropriate that we are formal. However, we can still be ourselves and be our authentic selves. And Royston, I'm never going to present like you and you're never going to present like me. And that's great. That's
Yeah.
what makes the world go round and it all unique and special. And I think there's a lot of comparison. People get caught up in that comparison piece, the imposter syndrome, all of that's going around in the head, rather than thinking, hang on a second, I've got something to bring to the table here and to
No,
help that audience learn something.
I love that bit about authenticity, because that was going to be one of my questions I was going to come to later. But since you've gone there already, let's deal with that, because I
Oh,
so passionately agree with that. That bring your personality to the presentation, because that's what people will really connect with. It's not the words, it's the delivery, and it's you as the individual, and that authenticity coming through loud and clear is really important. So I love the way that you talked about just make sure you bring your natural self to the presentation is a really great message to land today.
which can be hard, can't it, for people? And I understand that it's not easy just to stand up and say, oh, just be yourself. But during a lot of the training courses that I do, and at about the middle of the day, I ask people just to get up and tell me a story. So they haven't had chance to prepare all these slides and everything. And don't get me wrong, we're going to talk about preparation and why that's important. But I get them to tell a story that they just know about their lives. And everyone stands up and delivers it brilliantly. I mean, I've had all sorts of stories, from birthing stories of someone's wife to jumping out of an aeroplane to becoming the choir master, really entertaining. And people get up and it's normally got a great beginning, a bit of intrigue, and then it takes us on a journey. And then we've got that kind of middle section. And then generally people end it really well, just naturally, because we're
Yeah.
storytellers. We've done this for millions of years. And then they realize, and I just say, just capture that. Just capture the essence of that when you stand up. And if you can then bring a story that's relevant, and sometimes, bizarrely, the jumping out of the aeroplane story might be relevant at the start of your presentation about risk. So
Yeah.
it's just thinking, how can I bring my everyday life to the table and tell people that story, rather than, hello, good morning, everyone. My name's Hannah, and today I'm going to speak to you about this. And all we've seen is the back of someone's head or them reading. And
Yeah.
whilst we don't say throw everything out, we don't want to throw the notes away if you need them. At the same time, we know our name, we know what we're going to talk about. So we can definitely do that at the beginning and tell a story and just build that connection with the audience.
Love it. Love it. Right, let's make this really practical. Imagine
Yep.
somebody, either an individual or you're with a group who you are starting on the journey with, and they've got this real fear and anxiety about even the thought of speaking in public. How do you help people to overcome fear? What are some of the strategies you would do with them right at the front end?
So there's a number of things in this mix here, and it depends on the level of anxiety that people are feeling. So I work with an incredible team, and it's not just me. So, for example, I work with an amazing coach called Jo Fairbranch, and she works with people with physical intelligence. So she's teaching techniques around breathing, shaking things off. What are you doing to prepare yourself? Because often what we can think about when we're preparing a presentation is about the deck. So, I've got my slide deck right, and okay, I've got my speech right. But actually, it's about, we need to take a number of steps back from that and think, how are we preparing ourselves? So Jo works with a number of the clients that I work, first of all, to really support them in that area. And I use a number of those techniques myself as well. So I don't know if you've ever had this, Royston, but, there's that voice on the shoulder that says, oh, you're not going to do a good job at this. Oh, this might not go very well. And And that's what you can fill your head with. So number one is mindset for me. And I believe you work and talk a lot about that, is reframing things.
Yeah.
And believing and knowing that you are the expert in what you are talking about. So I have to tell myself this, Hannah, this is going to go really well. This is an opportunity. You're a great facilitator. You're being invited to do this for a reason. So step one, mindset. Two, how you're preparing your body. So for me, there's a few things that I do. Breathing sounds obvious, but it's huge because it just slows everything down. We can be in a whirlwind, can't we? Answering the phone, doing this email, then we're up onto the stage. Certainly if you're at a networking event or being asked to speak at a conference, and suddenly you're there. And it's like, well, we need to take a step back.
Yeah.
So I will do that breathing. I'll also do the power pose. You may have seen the Amy Cuddy TED talk that's really, really famous about how we hold ourselves for 2 minutes before we go into a high pressured situation will impact the hormone levels in our body, whether cortisol is flying or whether actually we're more grounded and whether we've got more testosterone in our body. So that for me is huge. But then it's that preparation piece of everything the night before, having my clothes ready, making sure that the tech's working. There are no surprises. I like to walk up to the stage. I was talking to a friend of mine who delivered a speech the other day, and I said, just get there 10 minutes early, walk up those steps, stand there, look out, get familiar with it, and walk back down again. And he said the difference that made to him was huge. So it's things like that, really. I think it's setting ourselves up as well as we possibly can. And then it's getting into, you know, I can talk about it next, about how we're really delivering our message effectively.
Yeah, you hit on two there that I'm absolute an advocate of, is the mindset piece. What you say will be the way. That little voice, you've got to silence that little voice in the back of your head, that chimp that's talking to you, as Steve Peters was saying there, the chimp paradox. Do you actually do like an overriding program with people? So will you help them create a positive incantation that they almost put on a loop in their minds that they just repeat before they go on stage? So for example, I'm just about to go on stage and deliver the best nerve-busting, value-adding presentation of my life. Do you do that kind of thing to get them in that, to stop that chimp from talking away at them?
What we talk about a lot is, what is your ritual? So like you're just saying there, what do you need to do? So for different people, I think, Royston, it's different. So for some, that would be a really important thing to do. For others, it may be visualization that we talk about, and actually imagining and visualizing yourself standing there in front of people. So I think it depends. Like I've worked with some people who, rather than calming down, actually need to get the energy going more. So I was working with one lady, and what we were doing was like arms up, arms down, you know, shoulders back. Let's get the energy going, because she was actually quite flat in the way that she was feeling. But for others who are high energy people, like I imagine you are, and for me as well, I need to ground myself, telling myself those things for sure, reminding myself of what I'm doing at the beginning, and also reminding myself to slow down, because I'm a natural fast talking person. There's lots of us are. We get all excited and we go on 110 miles an hour. There we go. Now I'm slipping over my words and we're going off like a train.
Yeah.
And there is such power. Like, we will come across with way more authority and gravitas if we just slow it down. And then use that pause as well, the power of silence when we're delivering. And I say that to people, when we stand up on the stage, the first thing that we need to do is stand and wait a beat. Good morning, everyone. It's not up there. Hi, I've heard it all, you know. Hi, sorry, where am I starting? Good morning. Like, car crash before we've even begun. So yeah, all of those things, Royston, I think can really help. And it's just taking time to consider it, really, isn't it? Rather than just the whirlwind like we talked about, and I'll get up there and wing it.
I think you hit a real golden nugget on its head when you said about breathing, because how you use your physiology, i.e. your body, is so important in that scenario. And for most people, if they are nervous or fearful or in a state of anxiety, their breathing goes to really short, shallow breaths. They starve their body of oxygen, and then it becomes a terrible virtuoso circle. So I think you're absolutely spot on. Getting that breathing right, and just your whole body then drops. And then I guess if you get your breathing right, Hannah, that will help when you get on stage.
Yes.
stop you coming out the blocks like a steam train, because if you're more calm, then therefore the language will then follow and you'll be a lot slower in your speech as opposed to coming out like a speeding train.
That's absolutely right. I find better words, better vocabulary. I speak with more gravitas and authority when I speak at this kind of pace. And that's why when I start a webinar, this is the kind of pace. Now, I'm not saying you stay there. We can mix it up and then we can get excited about something.
Yeah.
But then we can bring it back down again. And that's the key. It's that mix is important, because we don't want to go really slow either, do we, the whole time, and everyone's just, having a nap.
Love it. So there, in terms of that camp of dealing with the nerves, there are two really practical techniques for our listeners. Mindset and get your breathing right will be two real practical takeaways. In terms of preparation techniques, you mentioned one about going on the stage before. What do you do? Have you got a ritual, a routine in order to get yourself in the right state to get into the performance zone? What's the preparation techniques that you would share?
That's the main thing, to be honest with you. Let me tell you an example. So the other day, I was doing a whole day of media training all day. And then I knew that I had half an hour to come back, do my hair and makeup, put my dress on and go and host an event for 800 people.
Wow.
Which is a big deal. So I knew that day that I could either think myself into a frenzy and be continually worrying about what's coming, or I could just work my way step by step through my day. And I came home and I just took it slowly. I walked up the stairs slowly. I put my makeup on slowly. I didn't go into that kind of whirling dervish piece that I could have done. And I actually stopped before I walked out the door. I don't know if you've heard of EFT tapping, but I did a bit of that, of just tapping on those meridian points and just saying some of those ritual pieces that you just said about how well it's going to go and how I'm brave and how it's going to be successful. And I did that just for a couple of minutes, and then I walked out the door, shoulders back, let's go. And then again, I did the same. I did the breathing before I walked on the stage, and it went really, really well, but it could have gone quite differently. But also it's back to that preparation piece. And if I may just talk about this at this moment, is that it's about the audience. So I think so often we're so focused on ourselves, and don't get me wrong, of course, we need to be focused on our delivery. But really, if we can take some of that spotlight off ourselves and think about the audience. So think about them and the fact that, what I was thinking that day is probably they're not that bothered about me, really. What they want to do is come to an awards ceremony and have a nice time. They want to have their food, they want to have their drink, and they want to chat to their mate next to them. So actually that helps. It's like, oh yeah, well, they're not that bothered about me anyway. So there's that gone. And then also just thinking, right, well, what do we want them to think? What do we want them to feel? And what do we want them to do today? So for me, I was thinking, well, I want them to think that this is going to be a great night and that they're going to be up for it. I want them to feel excited, and I want them to, think about maybe entering the awards next year and coming back again. So if you've got that in your mind, that will then determine not only the content of your speech and what you're going to deliver, but the way that you deliver it as well. So that for me up front, mixed in with that storytelling opening hook, is what then sets you up well, because you get the audience with you. And once you've got that audience with you, you're cooking on gas.
Yeah, I love it. Hannah, I've got a really intriguing question that I want to throw your way, because you talked there about a lot of those rituals that you still do those today.
Well,
and even though you've been doing what you've been doing for so many years, and you've done so many journalism and broadcasting, and you host events and so forth, do you still, even to this day, go through your preparation, your planning, getting yourself in the right mindset? Do you still do all those today as if it was the first time you'd ever done it?
100%, always.
That's
because
interesting.
I know what happens if you don't. So for me, I'm actually way more comfortable on camera, because that's what I did for, best part of 2 decades more. So that kind of piece is less nerve-wracking for me. But standing in front of an audience, a live audience, I did less of, even though I've done it. But I think that no matter who you are and how experienced you are, you never quite know what might happen because it's live. So if you are prepared, you know that it's going to go well. So when I'm delivering webinars, for example, of which I've done quite a few since the pandemic, and it's opened up that opportunity, I will rehearse that opener again and again and again. I will talk it out loud, Because when we talk it out loud, we realize, oh, what am I slipping up on? What doesn't sound great? But
Yeah.
also it's embedding it into us so we don't have that mind blank at the beginning. And then when we deliver well at the beginning, then we set ourselves up for the whole piece. If
Yeah.
that bit doesn't go well, we're in trouble and it's hard to recover. So absolutely, Royston, I think that, to be honest with you, most people that I speak to, even if they public speak as a career, as a job, they will have a ritual and they will do something before they get on that stage to make sure that it goes really well and really smoothly for them.
I just think that's a really important point to share because one, you are a professional and you are absolutely top of your game in terms of what you do, hence the things that you do today. But for any elite athlete or any elite person at the top of their game, I think they still have that ritual to get themselves into the performance zone, to set themselves up for success. It's not something you just do in the early stage. It's like the pilot on the plane, isn't it? Every single flight they do, they're going through their pre-flight checklist. They don't miss a beat. They do it every single time, which is why safety record is so great. And I don't think that's any different for us in terms of what we do. I still have my ritual, and I know if I miss a part of my ritual or my preparation, then something might go wrong in there. And I look back afterwards and I go, Royston, that's because you didn't do this at the start.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. It's so true. I'd really like to know, what is your ritual, Royston, before you go on the stage?
So one of my rituals is I write my goals. And you touched on it there. One of my questions that I write is, how do I want my audience to be thinking, feeling, and acting during the presentation and after the presentation? So I actually physically write my goal and then I sign and date it at the bottom. So it's almost like a soft contract with myself to say, right, Royston, go on stage, bring your whole best self and go and make it happen. So that's part of it. Well, you talked about other stuff as well. I mean, I always have my own water bottle. I always use my own clicky because I know it's got batteries in it that I've tested beforehand.
Yes, the tech.
Right. So you just do. It's like, I think all elite people who are at the top of their game, they all have those rituals, though, their preparation, their routines that they do that just allow them to be the best. And then when they get up there, they can bring their best self to what they are doing.
I couldn't agree more. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, that could be in a meeting, Royston. It doesn't need to be a big moment like a stage, because that meeting could be a very big moment. It could be that next step up the ladder. It could be an interview. It could be a pitch, whatever it may be. So I'd really recommend that people think about that before they walk in that room. How can they be the best selves in that moment and turn up and really show up and speak up and speak out in the way that they want to?
Yeah, I love it. I, with my clients, when they say to me, oh, Royce, I'm always late for meetings, one of the things I've started saying to them is, put the meeting in your diary 10 minutes early and get there 10 minutes before everybody else. And use that 10 minutes, like you say, to just go through, right, what's the outcome that I want from this meeting? How do I want to show up? Am I in the right mindset so that when people come in, I can hit the ground running? When people come in, I want to be the first here because I want to read the room about how people walk in, what their energy levels are like, how they sit down. And then when you do start the meeting, because you've been there 10 minutes before, you are so in the performance zone and you're raring to go and you're on the front foot as opposed to being on the back foot.
Absolutely right. And sometimes everything goes against us, doesn't it? And you could be stuck in that traffic jam, or you might have had a family emergency. But then, again, I had this recently while I was hosting an event. The weather was horrific. I think the school run took me over an hour, and I was hosting an event for an area of business that's not my area of expertise, because often that's what I'm doing. I'm facilitating rather than being the expert in that area. And again, I had to talk to myself in that car and say, Hannah, this is happening. You're just going to have to breathe and this is going to be okay. And I knew everyone was waiting for me. But I just took the choice in that moment to go, right, let's just calm it all down. Otherwise, I'd have walked in there with my heart going 110 and not performing very well at all. Thankfully, it went okay.
But is that a skill that's taking you a long time to develop? Because that scenario you just shared there, I could see people getting themselves staring themselves into a frenzy. And then them walking in the room and then them being completely on the back foot. Is that a skill that you've had to master over time? Was it difficult? How did you build a muscle memory to be able to almost what I call control the controllable, where you can own the choices, own your mindset, and own the state that you put yourself in?
I think that's it. It's learning and having been through it so many times and having not performed like that and having got myself into a frenzy, then realizing, oh, that wasn't a very good outcome, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
then really teaching that now with everyone that we work with is this is a choice in terms of how we turn up. So yeah, that's now programmed in my mind. But to be honest with you, a lot of people haven't necessarily given it that thought. And I don't blame them in that. I was one of those. But then you
Yeah.
start to realize, oh, okay, I could do this better. But unfortunately, sometimes because that's been the journey and then they've stepped onto a stage, they then discount themselves and then say, I
Yeah.
can't do this because it went really badly. And it's like, yeah, but that was just once. And maybe
Yeah.
it might be twice. But actually the third time, you'll be smashing it out of the park. And I'm working with people who, honestly, at the start of the day would say to me, Hannah, look, I've come on this course, but this is not for me. I'm not a great presenter. I find this absolutely terrifying. And honestly, by the end of the day, are walking across the stage using their hands and telling stories effectively. And that's what drives me. That's what I'm so passionate about. And that's why I love what I do. But I do believe that everyone can do it. It's just taking those steps. And even if it's not the big performance on the stage, it might just be stepping out in the meeting and saying something. And then it might just be contributing to a presentation and doing a bit of it. You know, it's not necessarily throwing yourself up and presenting in front of 1,000.
Yeah. And when you talk about creating an impact, in your opinion, what makes a speech or a presentation, what makes it memorable?
Definitely passion. If you've read Talk Like TED, that's what they talk about that needs to be first, is we need to care about what we are talking about. If we don't care, no one else is going to. So really that needs to come across, and that comes across through the storytelling. So that's the key really to success. I show a clip of Oprah Winfrey in my training sessions, and it's really interesting because she's speaking to Harvard University. And you think of Oprah, I mean, an incredible orator, an amazing public speaker. She's absolutely brilliant at what she does. I have so much respect. But there she is standing there. And even Oprah, you can tell, is a bit nervous because there are these tells. She puts her hands behind her back. She puts her hand on the lectern. She's not got good eye contact at the beginning. And you're like, gosh, this is really interesting. But then she tells her story. And she just comes to life and her eyes are alive and she's got that amazing eye contact with the audience. And we watch that clip and everyone's like, no way. I mean, one, it's encouraging that you think that Oprah also gets a bit nervous. But two, what are our tells that we are nervous? But three, if back to that story, if we can tell that up front, it just gets us going, doesn't it? We find our groove, we can bring everything to life and we just relax. And it's about setting ourselves up well. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. But yeah, ultimately it's about storytelling, passion, and also, Royston, it's having a structure. So again, what TEDs say with their TED Talks is 3 main points. And then their umbrellas really of what you want to talk about. I think often people can think, oh, I'm going to talk about this and this and this and this, and it's just all over the show. So today I'm going to talk about the why, the how, and the when. And we're like, we know the journey that we're on, for example.
Yeah.
And then also ultimately, how do we finish? Do we fizzle out? So, yeah, great. Thanks very much. Any questions? Or do we just go, so yeah, that's it from me. And we just fall off that cliff. So it's thinking about the whole piece, that beginning, that middle section, but the end. And often that's the bit people forget about as well.
You're so spot on. I find that all the time, that people put so much attention into that middle part, the main message of what they want to deliver, but they forget the bookends.
Yes.
And people remember primacy, immediacy in life. People remember the first thing that you say and the last thing. So you spot on the opening and or I call it the intro and the outro. How do you make sure you got your bookends and you put as much attention, if not more, into creating your intro and outro as you do the middle body? And do you see people falling into that trap all the time in terms of not not putting the attention into those two bookends.
Very much so. I certainly
Yeah.
see it as well in panel interviews that I support people with. They'll think about the point that they want to say, but not necessarily how they're going to finish it. And that's where
Yeah.
they can just kind of taper off and it all just kind of loses its way. And people need to learn to stop talking as well. We teach that in media interviews. Just stop. Because it's when we try and fill that gap that we can get ourselves into trouble. But that's what we learn. I mean, this is where I'm so lucky to have had the grounding that I've had, is we always knew how we were going to start and how we were going to end when we were live. Because anything and everything happened, you know, whether that was with children, live animals, whatever we were working with, or whether we're in the storms with waders on, anything and everything happened. But if you knew where you were going and how you were going to finish and how you were going to throw back to the studio, you knew that you were going to be okay. And it's the same whether that's, again, on a panel, on a stage, whatever it may be. So yeah, those bookends, Royston, you're spot on with that.
No, I love that. I love that because the middle bit, and I always say to people that always remember, which I think you made the point earlier about, you know, don't try and script the whole thing because
Right.
you'll set yourself up for failing. You might have cards if you need them, great,
Yep.
but don't go up there with a script. And the thing I always say is remember, people don't know what you're going to say. You
No,
might think you've forgotten a bit or something, but it doesn't matter because the audience don't know. But I really like your point that you make there. If you've really got, you know, where you're starting and you know where you're ending, you might be like the ship at sea that's got to avoid a monsoon storm or the prevailing winds might be knocking you off course. But if you know where you're trying to get to, you'll ultimately be able to get it back on track. I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's so simple for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, and it's true, anything can happen, and it does, doesn't it? The tech breaks, the screen breaks. A friend of mine the other day, someone's phone somehow connected to the screen. So what was on that lady's phone ended up on the screen rather than her presentation. You know, all of these crazy things can happen. And it's about needing to think on our feet and having a bit of a laugh sometimes as well. You know, if it's not going perfectly, that's okay. Be real about it. But another top tip that I could mention at this point. So I was working with someone the other day, and what we tend to do, certainly I think as British people, I don't know if this is the world over, but we love an apology, don't we? We love to say sorry. And we seem to like to tell everybody when things are going wrong as well, rather than just being quiet. So she did this great opener. And then she had her notes down. So I said, well, let's just try and do it without notes. She's like, yeah, I'm feeling ready for that. But then she did the great opener and then she lost her way and she had that mind blank only for about 2 seconds. But it went like this. Oh, sorry. I've forgotten where I am. Hang on a second. Let me just find my notes. Instead, I said, right, okay, hang on a second. Let's just do that again. Finish the opener. Just go and pick up your notes in silence and put them back in front of you. So she finished her opener. Okay, so moving on to my next point. That was 2 seconds, if that. Yeah. And then we've got the difference of authority and gravitas rather than apologetic and telling everyone you've made a mistake. And I think that's the problem with that filling the gap piece. We need to learn to try not to do that and just to stop talking and let that silence just sit there for a moment. Because it does feel like an eternity, doesn't it, when we're on the stage and we've got those moments of silence.
There you have it. We just played you one. No, Hannah, I think that is such a great point to make because you know, people do oversell or they put apologies in there. They try to fill the space, whereas one of the greatest skills that you have is silence. And whilst it might only be in reality a small fraction of a second or a couple of seconds, if you're stood up there and you're nervous, it can feel like an eternity, can't it?
Yeah.
But great practical skill.
Also, just, I mean, I know we're talking about presentation skills, but in media training, so as a journalist, you're actually taught that to go quiet because it's when people fill the gap. So that's when people say things and they just keep talking and they can get themselves into trouble. So just a top tip if you're doing a media interview, again, say what you're going to say and stop. And then it's the journalist's job to ask you the next question, not for you to fill the gap.
Yeah, they're great tips. It's so practical tip that. And you're right, whether it's a media interview or whether it's your presentation, the use of silence and the pause is, I think, one of the key skills that you've got in your presenting success toolkit, if we call it that. Hannah, you've talked a lot
Absolutely.
about storytelling. Just can you enlarge, because you've mentioned it a number of times now. What do you mean by storytelling? How do people really think about what it is they're doing and take that concept and really apply it?
It could be so many things, can't it, Royston? So at the beginning of our talk today, for example, we talked through some stats and facts. And that can just be that really big stat fact at the beginning that just draws people in. You could
Yeah,
pose a problem that you want to be able to then show that there's a solution to. It could be something that you know that most people experience in everyday life that you could put up front. Or it could be that story, that personal story. Oh, just the other day I was talking to a client and this happened. And suddenly we're like, oh, we like that little bit of info or that little bit of gossip. And so I think it's just thinking smart, isn't it, in terms of how can I open this, but also how can I pepper the whole piece really with that storytelling. And going back to the notes thing that we were just talking about. So if you are someone who really feels that at the moment you need to rely on a written speech, that's absolutely fine. Set yourself up well, do what you need to do. But if you can put stories within it that you just know, then that's your opportunity to come off the notes and tell that story. So
yeah,
that's where that storytelling really helps us as well as presenters. So I can tell you lots of different things that happen to me in the news, and you'll be able to tell me the same in your life and career. And that's when everyone's like, oh, I'm interested. I want to know about
yeah.
this. So also you'll notice if people are zoning out in the room, if you've got a few little stories up your sleeve, you can throw another one in, and I can guarantee that audience will come back and will be listening again. So I think there's so many things that we can think about as stories, and really ending potentially with one as well. Like we talked about how we're ending well. It can be a mic drop moment, fantastic. But it could be a summary at the end, another little story. It could be going back to that stat or fact. That
Yeah,
technique's used a lot in films, isn't it? It's where we start, it's where we may also end and bring people full circle. So it's just
yeah,
thinking about that storytelling at the end as well, that people are going to go home and remember that. And ultimately, that's what we want to do, is for people to remember us and remember what we were talking about. But I can guarantee they're going to remember it more if you've told stories, because they'll probably remember the story and then relate it to the piece that you wanted them to be educated about.
yeah. No, I absolutely love that. I just think it's such an important part. And for most people, if they think, well, am I a good storyteller? If you're a parent, I can bet you're a good storyteller, because you
Yeah.
will have either read stories to your children at night, or they will have said, tell me a story about your childhood, and you will have just made it up from your memory. And so I
Mm.
think all of us have got that storytelling ability and technique in us. It's just about whether we allow that to come to the fore. I think people get wooden when they're doing presentations because they think, oh, I've got to deliver this message. Whereas if you wrapped it and said, okay, what's the story that I'm trying to tell and what's the narrative of that story, then I think it just changes. And then you get the emotional connection as opposed to coming across as stiff and just logical.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I do understand that there are more formal presentations. I work with people who are working in areas of industry that you might say are not quite so creative. But ultimately, that is still an interesting area. And there's definitely a way that we can still bring it to life. And that's our responsibility. And you're
Yeah,
right, whether you're a parent or whether you're a young person, they're telling each other stories all the
yeah,
time. Young
yeah,
children are telling stories, but we forget that. I think when we get up on that stage, we go into, I need to deliver all of this. I mean, something that I'm seeing less of, which is really good. I used to see reams of text on slides. And that's
yeah,
because people felt that they needed to have everything there as their comfort blanket. And if they've got it there on their PowerPoint slide, they're going to be okay. And what I say to people is like, look, if you feel that you need a lot of text, build that as your slide first of all, use that as your notes if that's how you work, but then strip it right out. I
yeah,
was working with a lady recently, and she works in kind of the compliance area, let's say, and we stripped her text. She had a fair amount, not too much, but it was still quite a lot. And we stripped it out to one word, and that one word was risk, and that sat on the screen. And suddenly she went, oh my gosh, look at that in terms of impact. Because we record review every time when we're doing our training. And she watched it back and she went, oh, what a difference. Because the reality is we can't read and listen at the
yeah,
same time. So
Yeah.
what happens is people are reading the text and they're no longer listening to you. So what do you need your slides really to say if you're using them?
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Less is more is the key message.
It
And
is.
I think you're right. It is a comfort blanket thing, the why people put too much on there. And you can tell when somebody's going to be confident in their presentation because there will be less on the slide.
Yeah,
And that's a
that's
good
it.
thing on a deck.
And the visuals are really important, aren't they, Royston? And I'm sure you do that when I've seen you do your presentations, but it's just like what captures people's imagination. The slides are actually there to enhance your presentation. They're not the presentation. You're the
Yes.
presenter. It's your communication and the way you're delivering. And so much of what we're delivering as well is not what we say. It's also about what we are doing with our bodies. So going back to body language, I mentioned when Oprah was delivering, putting her hands behind her back and doing things like that. What are our tells that are showing people that we're uncomfortable when we're on that stage? So are we fidgeting? Are we doing things with our hair? You know, what are we doing that's giving us away? Are
Yeah.
we looking really tense and putting our hands in our pockets? Lots of people go to that actually and think that they look more comfortable like that, but then you're stuck, aren't you, with your hand in your pocket? So if you can, it's using your hands. And if you struggle with that, maybe holding an iPad, you mentioned cue cards to ground yourself. But yes, there's lots of things out there. Sorry, as I'm talking, it's like, and this, and this, and this. But the
Yeah.
reality is if you can just one step at a time, try one new thing maybe that you think, yeah, I can do that. Don't try and do 100 things. You know, nail that, get that right, and then think, okay, I've done that. Now I can step into the next thing. Then you will naturally build confidence. It's not expecting to be able to deliver like Oprah on day one. You know, if only we could all do that.
If only. I've got two final questions for you because I'm
Yep.
conscious of time. What is the most embarrassing moment that you've ever had? I'm sure you've been asked this question so many times. The most embarrassing thing that's happened to you that you are prepared to share on the podcast today?
Oh, I've had so many, Royston. I mean, so many. When you work in live television news, you know, everything can go wrong and everything can happen, and it does happen. And you have a good laugh. And we would always have the Christmas bloopers reel, you know, that they would play at the end of the year and look back. But the good thing is when you saw that Christmas tape was that you realized that everyone was making mistakes every day. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't just you. But I'll tell you this story, and it's a story from when I think I was 18 and I'd only just started on the television, and it was a really big learning moment for me. And it was because I wasn't present. So when we talk about presenting, it's also being present, right? And being really focused. And I was so worried about a word, I can't even tell you what that word was now, in script 3, that was where my focus was. So I'm reading script 1 and I kind of get through script 1 okay, but then I get to script 2 and now I'm really worried about script 3. And I had to say the word disadvantaging, which I do not have a problem with, but on this particular day it went like this. And that is disman. And I think it's Anchorman. It's one of those programs, you know, where it looks like a stuck record. And honestly, this went on for some time. And I'm just continually doing this. And my news editor in my ear, because they're in the gallery and they're talking through an earpiece, rather than saying the whole word, which would probably been really helpful. So disadvantaging, and I'd have been able to say it. They just said, screamed down the mic, Dajing! So you can imagine what happened, Royston. It went like this. Disadvantaging, growers. And on I went with the script. And then I got through script 3, I think, fine, because I was in such fear at that point of like, and the adrenaline was going. But it was a lesson that day to me. If you can't say something, change the word.
Love it.
Also, be in the moment. Be where you need to be rather than thinking, what's going on over there? Well, why is that person napping while I'm presenting? Oh, they're on their phone, and suddenly we're gone and our mind is somewhere else. So I learned something that day, and they played it again and again and again. And I'll tell you this one as well, because I got a lot of money from It'll Be All Right in the Night several times when they played it. I was doing an interview with a farmer, and never do an interview with a farmer over the back of a cow. So he's standing one side, I'm standing the other, and you can imagine I do the interview, the tail starts to go up in this cow, and I'm thinking, I don't know much about cows, but I know that's not a good sign. And sure enough, everywhere. Cameraman was howling, I was howling, I was covered, absolutely covered. So, and I got £250 every time they played it on the telly, so, silver
Um,
lining.
oh, yeah. I'd love to know how many £350 you got, but what a great story. Hannah, if there was one final thing in terms of this, huge subject that we're talking about today, speak up, stand out, mastering the art of public speaking. If there's one final message that you sent our listeners away with that would help them to really think about where they are on their journey mastering this skill, what would it be?
Record and review yourself. Everyone hates listening to themselves and everyone hates watching themselves. And I am one of those people as well. I watch myself back and go, oh gosh, did I really say that? Or I'm really annoying, or whatever it may be. We don't like hearing our own voice, but it is the only way that we can learn. So talking about mistakes, Royston, whenever we had a bad program in television news, you knew what was going to happen when you walked in the next day. The news editor would say, we're going to sit down, we're going to watch that.
Yeah.
And you'd watch it back like this. But then you'd realize, if only I'd have done that. Or, okay, I can see what went wrong. Or I'm delivering like this and I could do that instead. So we've all got the technology. Back to technology. We've got phones, laptops, wherever it may be, iPads, etc. We can record ourselves and see those tells, the way that we're delivering, the phrasing that we're saying, the storytelling, whatever it may be. And we can just practice that. And I'm honestly, you don't need me as a coach to do that, even though I help people and that's how we work. We are our own harshest critics. But what I would say in that is that please don't be too hard on yourself. Get other people's feedback, because other people see in you what we don't see in ourselves. And when we record review, we can hone, but also get feedback from other people because they'll tell you the good stuff, because often we're just quite good at telling ourselves the bad stuff.
What a great final message, record and review. So practical, but you're right. And for a lot of people, that will freak them out because there's nothing worse than hearing your own voice, seeing yourself on camera. But as you say, it's the only way to learn.
It is.
So, Hannah, if people wanted to get hold of you and understand more about what you do, where can they get in touch with you? Because I know a lot of our listeners will be really interested in this subject area today.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to hear from people. Drop me a line. You can DM me or just connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find me, Hannah Shellswell. And then also, my website is the website is boostpresents.com. Yeah, drop me a line and I'd love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Hannah, thank you so much. I know there are a number of golden nuggets in there that people will find really valuable in order to really speak up, stand out, and accelerate their journey in terms of mastering the art of public speaking. So from Hannah and Royston, the host of The Life of a Business Leader, until our next episode, goodbye for now.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you. Goodbye.